Well, Vapor, welcome to Long Blue Leadership. We are so thrilled you're here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So the cadets get to spend some time with you at NCLS. Here, the Long Blue Line's going to get to hear from you. And, we could actually go through the list, F-22 pilot, USAFA 2011 graduate, you've been in combat, you're NASA pilot. The list is probably shorter what you haven't done, but frankly, I'm just excited that you're here on Earth with us because the last time we spoke, you called me from outer space. So.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun.
Chat with you then too.
Yes. So let's just jump right in. So if we can just kind of catapult you, and let's do it in the way that that NASA does into space, maybe starting with the countdown and then the G's you take. What is that experience like? And maybe what are some things you were thinking about in those moments?
Oh, yeah. So, we launched on March 14th.
Okay.
First attempt was March 12th. And we actually scrubbed the first launch. So we got all the way down to T-minus 42 minutes right before we armed the launch escape system. So that's kind of a big milestone on the countdown.
Okay.
We were having issues with some hydraulics and the clamp that actually holds on to the rocket wall and then lets go. So
yes,
we weren't quite sure whether it was going to let go. So they scrubbed the launch then. It was fascinating. You don't feel like you've got a ton of adrenaline going, but, you feel kind of like you're in a sim. We do some really phenomenal training. And so when you're sitting on top of the rocket, it feels like you're in a simulator.
Okay.
Except it's breathing and living and the valves are moving and you can hear the propellant being loaded and all of that. And so there's a very real portion to the launch day.
Okay.
But then, coming down off of that adrenaline, we got a day off. Thankfully, we could just kind of rest and relax and then go
Try
again.
it again, right?
Yeah. So everything went smoother the second try. Of course, everybody's nerves were a little less, and everything was, it just felt calmer the whole way out. But yeah, when that countdown hits 0, I like to say you're being slingshotted off the earth. That's how it felt. And in that moment, like you're going. There's over 1 million pounds of thrust, and they all and it's going.
That sounds like a lot. I can't really fathom in my mind what that feels like.
Yeah.
Can you describe it in any way?
I talk about in an F-22 and an afterburner takeoff, which is the most thrust that we have basically in any airplane on Earth.
Right.
You get set back in your seat really far. And, if you think of an airliner takeoff, you kind of get set back in your seat a little bit, like
Probably
multiply that by
like what you
multiply that by like 10.
Oh.
Yeah. 10 or 20. And
Right.
then that happened for 9 minutes straight on a rocket.
Oh,
right? You're just being forcefully set back in your seat for 9 minutes straight and just thrown off of the Earth. And in 9 minutes, you're in orbit.
So when you had your practice, did you experience that level for that long as well?
For the
the sim.
simulators.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't necessarily simulate the G's in the sim.
Okay.
So that's like the one part that, we go through the whole launch, but you're sitting at 1G the whole time.
Right.
So, and throughout the launch, the G's build, then we back off the thrust and the G's build again. And then you have an engine cutoff. And I like to explain, like, if you could visualize like an old cartoon and everybody's in the car driving and dad slams on the brakes and everybody hits the windshield.
Yes.
And then he slams on the gas again and everybody goes back to their seats. Like that's what it felt like when the engine cut off. And main engine cuts off and then within a few seconds the second engine lights and you're set back in your seat again.
Wow.
So I like to give that visual because that's what
really
it felt
helpful
like.
actually. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you're there, you're in space. And I guess my first question would be, what's something that in that moment you were either thinking or are you still just orienting yourself? What is that like?
Oh man. We're still in the seats for the first few moments in space and we have to open the nose cone. There's some other things that are happening on the spacecraft and getting ready for a burn, for a phasing burn to get up to and catch up with the International Space Station. But then eventually you get to unbuckle, right, and get out of your seat.
Okay.
And floating for the first time, I got out of my seat and I'm floating there. It felt like, Captain Marvel when she's like hanging out up there.
Yes.
Like that's how I felt. And I like to give the visual because it's like, it's just nothing you've ever experienced in your life, and then you look out the window and the view is something, it's indescribable. I don't think we have the right words in the English language to describe what it feels like to look back at Earth from space.
Was there a moment when you were looking out at Earth, did you kind of play back just different things in your life? Did you think about, significance of things or like scope of things or even just the vantage point? Did it kind of just change things or were you just in awe of the moment?
No, I think, we talk about the overview effect when astronauts specifically look back at Earth and it hits everybody kind of differently. And for me, I think the biggest thing, when you look at a map of the states or a map of the world, every country is a different color or every state's a different color. And there are lines that describe the borders, right? And those don't exist in space. If those don't exist, you can't see different colored states, right? But you can see the Grand Canyon, and you can see the mountains, and you can see the Amazon, and you can see the desert in Africa. And you get to learn the world geography by colors and terrain. And it's a really good reminder that, we're all humans and we're all on this little fragile marble, just trying to take care of each other and trying to take care of Earth. And so I think that's what hit me the most was just there are no borders and we're all the same.
Gosh. Well, it's a unique and probably highly impressive team that you're with. I mean, we know the road to get to becoming a NASA astronaut is certainly one that is very difficult. Starts from many, many in the thousands down to 10. Mm-hmm. And so, when we think about leadership, and I've heard you share this before with others, you talk about teamwork and leadership. Mm-hmm. Maybe explain a little bit what that's like in space when you're also highly effective leaders. Yeah. What does that look like?
That's a great question. I think for us, it is a very fluid movement, right? You lead one day, you follow the next. And, I'll give you an example. So Anne McClain was the commander of SpaceX Crew 10 for NASA. So she was in charge of Crew 10 is our ride up to the space station and our ride home, right? It's the capsule, the rocket and the capsule. And then we were on Expedition 73 aboard the International Space Station, where Takuya Onishi, who was our mission specialist on Dragon, as soon as we crossed into the hatch and he took command, he is now the commander of the space station. Okay. And Anne and I are flight engineers. And so it's a pretty fluid movement in terms of leading and following. But ultimately, it's just about being a good teammate and taking care of each other. And I think that being a good leader is taking care of other people. Right. And we talk about team care, self-care and team care is like the huge parts that we actually train and learn about at NASA as we go through our training, because you're on this really small space. Yes. In the vacuum of space for 5+ months at a time. And there are only 7 people up there. Yes. And so you have to learn and everybody's going to have a bad day. We're all humans, and there's no hiding when
What's
it's just
a bad
the
day
four
like
of you.
In space?
People make mistakes, right? We're all human. You might make a mistake on something. You might mess up a procedure. You hope that it's not something that causes a safety incident, right? The main goal for me, at least, was I know I'm going to make mistakes as long as I'm not unsafe. I'll be happy. And I think that a lot of us have that conscious, decision-making process, and goal. But I think that, we're also humans and have Earth lives, and your Earth life doesn't stop when you go to space. And so bad days could be something going on at home. Bad days could be something going on in space, could be an interaction that you had with somebody on the ground that, there's a lot of communication that happens between us and the ground, and there are thousands of humans on the Earth that keep the space station running. So bad day could be anything, but it's tough to hide up there, right? Here you can kind of like duck and cover, and maybe you just spend the day in your office. Yeah, exactly. Yes. But it doesn't happen up there. We have to continue to work and continue to function.
So you mentioned that there are 7 of you in this tight space. Now, when you go up there, your crew, is it the same 7?
For the majority of our time.
Okay, yep. Excellent. Yep. So one of the things we think about in whenever we're leading or we're working with teams is trust. Mm-hmm. And obviously you have a great amount of trust with the crew that you're going up there with. Mm-hmm. But then you mentioned you went on to the ISS and you're working with others. What does that look like when it's someone maybe you haven't worked as closely with in a really important mission? Yeah.
So for the 7 expedition members, we actually do train together for a little bit of it. Not nearly as closely as, the 4 of us training for Dragon mission, but because the most dynamic parts are launch and landing. So we do a lot of training together just as the 4 of us. But we train all over the world, right? So we go to Japan and Germany and Canada, and we go to, Hawthorne, California, and we go to Russia, and we train with them, and we learn about the Russian segment, and we train with our fellow cosmonauts there. Wow. And we do emergency training specifically all together because it takes all 7 of us in an emergency doing the right thing and knowing everybody's roles. And so we train that together as well. And then anytime you're in the same country or same city together, right, then you get to spend the time outside of the training to get to know each other. And so you actually know your crew fairly well. but obviously everybody's from a different nation, right?
Right.
And we had Americans, we had Japanese astronaut, we had Russians. So you learn everybody's culture, and it's actually, to your point on being in that small and not necessarily knowing everybody, there's also a cultural aspect.
Right.
We get to know each other. We get to learn about other people's cultures and figure out how to communicate and live and work even across the whole world.
What was something that you learned from another culture of astronaut, maybe in the leadership realm, or just something that you took away? Is that's really something that surprised me, or I really like to emulate?
I love Tak's leadership style. So Takuya Nishi, he's one of those more quiet humans, and he's super kind, but he is the most intelligent human I've ever met.
Wow.
And he is super efficient with everything he does. And he pays attention to all of the little things. And so he does it and he only speaks up when he thinks something needs to be changed, or when he thinks that we need to go in a different direction. Otherwise, he's pretty happy to let you go as far as you want to go on something. And then when he thinks you're going to run off a cliff, he pulls you back. So when he speaks, everybody listens. And I love that. I think some of that is cultural, obviously, him being from Japan, but I think it's also just his personal leadership style. But I learned a ton from him in terms of, how to interact with people, how to let people be themselves, but also how to run the ship. And everybody knew exactly who was running the ship.
Wow. And it shows that respect lens that you were just kind of talking about when he spoke, everybody listened.
Yeah.
Is that something that you feel you already had, that kind of leadership style? Or is that something that you've kind of evolved in yourself even?
I like to think that that's the way that I lead. That's kind of how I try to be a leader. But we're not perfect, right? Nobody's perfect.
Right.
And watching him, taking notes from how he interacted with everybody, the things that he thought of, the things that he brought with him for us on station. We get a very limited amount of stuff, personal things that we get to bring with us. And he brought things for the crew.
Oh, wow.
That were huge milestones for professional careers. Just the attention to detail on the human beings around him was pretty phenomenal. So it's one of the things I'm working on to be better at, because I like to think I'm good at it, but I saw the master work.
I love that. And something you said about him, he always attention to detail, and he saw the little things. He paid attention to the little things. I remember a past conversation we had. You had a little nugget from Colonel Nick Hague, also USAFA 98, I believe.
Yeah.
And I think he said to you something about, Nichole, don't forget that you're squishy, or something like that. And so have you had more of those moments in there where they're little nuggets or little moments that actually give you big return or big lessons in your life?
Oh, definitely. That one's a funny one because the space station is metal.
Yes,
Everything is metal, and it's hard. And so, and we still have weight. Mass. We still have mass. We don't have weight, right? Because we're in microgravity. But if you're cooking around a corner and you run into a handrail, it's going to hurt. If you imagine going 10 or 15 miles an hour into something metal, it's going to hurt. You're squishy. So that was a great lesson in slowing down and making sure you're watching your surroundings, right? But one of the things that Anne McLean says that cracks me up, but every time it happens, it's yep, this is definitely. She says, experience is that thing you learn right after you need it. And so we had a lot of those moments, right, where you learn a lesson and you're like, I wish I knew that 5 minutes ago. And so it's, that's something that applies everywhere in life.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, experience is that thing you always needed right before that happened. But we also like to say Crew 10 can do hard things. That's another thing that it's kind of our motto. Whether it's training, some of the training can be really physically demanding. It's really mentally demanding. And it's a lot of travel. When you get assigned to a mission, it's probably 1.5 to 2 years of training, and then you're gone for 6 months. So out of that 2 to 2.5 years, you're not home for over a year. Wow. So you're all over the world traveling to train and work. And like I said, we're all humans. We have Earth lives, we have homes, but you got situations back home. And so navigating personal lives, navigating professional lives, navigating tough training, Crew 10 can do hard things. We like to say that.
I like that. It also talks a bit about your grit, Crew 10 grit.
Yeah.
So, but talking about hard things, I'd like to take us to the time when you've, been piloting the F-22. And, you've seen combat. I heard you speaking a little bit before about a no-notice deployment. Let's visit that time in your life. What were you doing? What was your role? And what was something you experienced?
Sure. So I was actually flying the day that we got notified, and just a standard training sortie. I landed, and some of the maintainers was like, "Hey, have you heard what's happening?" And I was like, "No,
What's happening?
What is happening?" And then we had a big squadron meeting, and that's when we got notified, like, "Hey, we're deploying." We were on the GRF, is what it was called at the time, but Global Response Force, and I think some of that structure has changed since I left that squadron. But so we knew that once we were on the GRF, there was a chance that we would get activated and get moved somewhere. Didn't necessarily expect it to be quite that quick.
Right.
I think it was like the next week we got this deployment. So we got notified on a Thursday, I think, and then on Monday I was taken off to go across the Atlantic.
Really no notice.
Yeah.
Yes.
So 4 days later, we were taken off. And then 7 days later, we were flying missions. We were stationed at Al Udeid Air Base, so we were flying out of Al Udeid within a week.
How many with you?
So when we deploy, we actually deploy with our maintenance squadron, so 300 people.
Okay.
20 to 30 of them are the pilots, and then the rest are the maintainers, and so it's the entire squadron. We morph into an expeditionary squadron, and so there are 300 people that head out. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So I imagine, on top of the fact that it was such a rapid movement, there's probably things that people had to obviously work through, family, this needs to happen. But what were some things that you experienced in that deployment, or even in just that transition?
And, again, I go back to taking care of people. I was a flight commander at the time.
Okay.
And we had 2 flight commanders, so I'm in charge of basically half the squadron. And we had a really wonderful commander who gave us the authority and the autonomy to lead the squadron. So, it's about taking like, how are you guys doing at home? Half our squadron didn't even have tan flight suits, right?
Oh my goodness.
We're working with logistics. We're trying to get everything ready. Like, does everybody have a go bag? Does everybody even know what a go bag is, right? Do you have the things you need? So working all of that, and then do you have the childcare figured out? Do you have the, how is all of your family doing?
Right.
Yeah. Are you ready for this? And then we had to do a bunch of last minute training before we left. And so it's really busy time. But it was one of the first times where I felt like I had an influence on the people that were under me, right? That I supervised. And so it was a really great experience to solve those problems, figure it out, and help people get off the ground in 4 days successfully, and leaving some semblance of structure at home, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So you said it was the first time where you kind of really felt that you had that impact. What would you say kind of maybe crystallized within yourself in learning that?
I think, it really solidified. I think I said, I try to lead by taking care of people, right? I truly believe if you take care of the human, they're going to do a really great job. You don't have to ask much of people at work and in their professional life if their personal and the human side of them is taken care of. And that's kind of what I mean when I say that solidified it for me. Like, make sure the humans are good to go, and they'll go do anything you want them to do.
Wow. So while on that deployment, you're leading half of that squadron. What were some of the challenges maybe that you experienced, and how did you grow as a leader during that time frame?
Scheduling is definitely a tough one. So we flew daytime and nighttime. We basically had an F-22 airborne for almost 24 hours a day for the entire 6.5 months. We left, and we were told it might be a 2 or 3 month deployment, and then it turned into 6 months, and then we got delayed coming home, and so then we stayed through Christmas, and those are the things that like really are tough for people. But we have a limited number of jets that we took. We have a limited number of pilots. We have a limited number of maintainers and parts, and so I think for us, managing a schedule. Between me and the other flight commander, managing a schedule, managing quality of life for everybody, and making sure that we're not burning people out, or that they're not, we're flying 8, 9, 10 hour sorties,
right?
And that's exhausting. It's just you in that airplane with your wingman in a different airplane.
Wow.
And so you have to manage again that human factor. The human capital is probably the toughest thing to manage.
Wow. And you talked about how the deployment kind of got extended. What were some things, because many of our listeners and our viewers they're leaders and at different levels of leadership and different times in their lives where they're doing that. When you were leading and you had some of those, your subordinates or those that were working with you that really experienced some troubles through emotions, through some of that, how did you help navigate them through that when you were all in that as well?
Right. I think at NASA, especially, we talk about self-care being a huge part of team care. And so, making sure I do this in my regular life too, but, making sure that you're getting enough rest, making sure that you're taking care of yourself and your personal life so that you can truly be present for the other people that need you.
Right.
And I think being present for others is one of the biggest things that you can do. They may not need a ton of help or they may not need the solution, but being there, being available, and being present for people is really important. But you can't do that unless you're good to go yourself.
Did you see that from someone? Did you learn that from someone you saw doing that, or just NASA? You said NASA brings that up, but did you see that at the academy, or where did you kind of gather that?
I think one of the things that hit me hard about showing up and being present was actually more professional. So. I kind of like skated through the academy on minimal sleep, and I was able to manage everything and do okay at everying, but I wasn't flying a $143 million airplane, right?
True.
And so, in pilot training is we started to talk about crew rest and in pilot rest. And like, that's the first time that I had kind of heard this concept of like, you need to go home and get rest so that you can be on your game, because flying airplanes, your decisions have real consequences, right? And you have to be present and available, and you have to be on your game to fly airplanes and do well in airplanes. And then the faster and the higher and the better the airplane gets, the more on your game you have to be. So I think it's something that has just kind of evolved in me. And then as a leader, I realized if you don't have any gas in the tank, you cannot help somebody else.
Right.
And so for me, it's just kind of been, over the last decade and a half of like, wow, I need my sleep. I need to make sure I'm good to go. I need to make sure my human is good, so that way I can help other humans. And when your decisions have real consequences, it's important that you're present and you're ready to go.
Have you seen some of the fact that you prioritize that for yourself, for you as your own human? Have you seen others kind of like see that, view that, and actually take that on as well themselves?
Yeah, I think they do. And I think as a leader, it's really important to set that example, right? The commander cannot be the first one in, last one out. Like, you just can't do that because everybody's going to stay until you leave. So setting the example of having a good home life balance as well, like home and work have to be balanced, sleep has to be balanced. Like, again, self-care is the biggest part of team care, I think. And if you model that, people start to realize it's important. The younger people that might burn themselves out trying to get somewhere, trying to get to the next step, or trying to impress somebody, or whatever the case may be, if they see you taking a step back and they see your success, maybe then they can start worrying about themselves too. So
I think that's a great lesson, leading by example for sure. There are probably moments that you experience both at the academy, while flying the F-22 or as an astronaut, where you don't have the luxury of balance. How do you navigate that, and how do you help others, get to that space maybe quicker?
Right. I think of everything as a season in life. It might just be a busy season, and you might just have to put some time in, but making sure that you are planning ahead and know that you're going to be able to take some time and reset. And that could be anything, right? That could be personal life, professional life. That could be, the 4-week training trip that we've got is going to be rough, and it's multiple time zones, and it's a ton of training. It's a ton of information. You're just going to have to get through it. But then, that week when we got home, I made sure my schedule was a little lighter. Whatever the balance is, I think of things in seasons, and crew 10 can do hard things, right? And that came from like, you can get through this next training session, right? Like, we're gonna do a mask to suit transition, which is like in a fire, you've got a mask on, you have to get from that mask into your spacesuit. It's a significant physical event. And there's limited oxygen, there's limited ability to breathe in the suit when in that specific environment. And so how do you slow down, take the breaths you need to get in there, to not then get to a point where you're panicking,
right? Or
that you're too exhausted or too hot or overdid or whatever it is, right? So I think even just that is a season. We're going to do 2 hours of this. That's my season. And then we'll get out of the simulator and we'll take a break, right? And if it happened on orbit, right, it would be like, we're going to get through this. We're going to solve the problem. We're going to manage the emergency. And then once things are set, we'll have a moment to breathe.
Wow.
So that's kind of how I think of it. And
I
it
like
could be
that.
Small
seasons.
Or large seasons.
Right.
Yeah.
Did seasons come a term that you kind of realized maybe at the academy? You were a volleyball athlete at the academy, and so volleyball has a season. But I guess my question is, like, how did you come to that realization? Like, oh, I can get through this, and I put it in a bucket of time almost in a season.
Yeah, I think it is. You learn a lot of time management at the academy, and when you're in the fall, you're really busy. Spring season is less busy. And so you kind of learn early how to manage, like, okay, I got to run, I got to sprint.
Right.
And then I can jog later or I can walk later. So, I think you learn that growing up in school, and, if you play sports or you do extracurricular activities or other things like that, or even just seasons in life at home, right? Life ebbs and flows. And so, and then I don't even know when I started saying it, but my sister and I started saying seasons of life to each other a long time ago. She's got 3 kiddos, so she's been in all sorts of seasons. But yeah, it's just, I think I started to time block things or block things off, and just and that's the only way you're going to get through life, is if you focus on what you need to do right now, be good at it, and then move to the next thing. Like you can have an idea of what's coming next, but you have to be present and do what you're doing there.
Yes.
And so seasons, time blocks, whatever you want to call it.
I like that. Well, you brought up your sister, and so you're an auntie of 3.
Yeah,
sounds like, yes.
I am.
Let's talk about your personal life and leadership. Some experiences you've had. Navigating your schedule. You're on the road so much. How do you prioritize, I guess, the things that are important to you when you have such a heavy schedule of being on the road, and the people that are important to you?
Right. I think that for me, my family has been a huge support system my whole life. I had a twin sister, built-in best friend.
Oh.
And
who's older?
She is... She's got to be my minute.
Okay, all right.
It's just,
does she hold that over you too?
Yes, of course she does. We've just always supported each other 100% in everything. She's been my biggest cheerleader through all of my life, and I've been her biggest cheerleader through all of her life. My main goal in life is to be the coolest auntie, like the best auntie. That is best auntie, and I would die happy. And they're a huge priority to me. I see them every 2-3 months.
Oh, wow.
Since my oldest was born. So for the last 14 years, I've just made it a priority. Even if it's like leave late on a Friday night and then get home late Sunday night, I make it the effort to go see them and to interact with them. And help foster them. They're growing up, and I love watching kids grow up and experience the world and see what can be done in the world. Their dad's a Marine, their mom's this really successsul real estate agent, their auntie's a pilot / astronaut. They've got like all these really
family
great
that's
role
really not
models.
doing very much at all.
Yeah. So they've got all these really great role models, and my goal is to just show them that it doesn't matter who you are. Like they only ever know me as auntie. Like they know I'm an astronaut, and they love that their friends know that I'm an astronaut.
They don't call you anti-vapor? No,
just auntie. Yeah. But they're always going to get a big hug from auntie. Like that's what's important to me. So.
Oh, well, you mentioned, going into space, being an auntie. So would you describe your time in space as it's probably out of this world? I mean, that's wow, that's terrible. That's terrible. I said it that way, but I think you've mentioned it is kind of the best time in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, best 5 months of my life.
Best 5 months of your life. And it's past now. When we think about, our evolution, whether personally, professionally, as leaders, et cetera, we have these ideas in our mind, like this is the pinnacle. How do you navigate what's next after you've experienced that pinnacle?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's something that a lot of us struggle with when we come home. Like, what's next?
Right.
We get 6 months of post-flight, so you've got some time to think and kind of get reintegrated, and you don't necessarily have to go back to work right away. I was able to spend a ton of time with my sister and her kiddos.
Yes.
But yeah, what's next? And I think for me, like the drive out to the launch pad, I was like, man, I've made it. The first time I looked out the window from Dragon, I was like, I've made it. The first time, we crossed the hatch and I went and looked out the cupola. I was like, whoa, wow, the hard work paid off. And I still feel like that to this day. I would have spent 4 more months in space if they had asked me to. And I would have turned around and launched right back the day that we landed. And it was because of the crewmates that I spent it with and the fulfillment that I got from the mission. But I think you can find fulfillment in a lot of ways. And my job now that I'm back, I'm going to be working with the new class of astronauts and their training for spacewalk. So in the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, our big pool, like my job is to be their mentor as they go through the spacewalk training.
Oh, wow.
And I cannot wait. I'm so excited. I cannot wait to have an impact and try to help teach this next generation of spacewalkers, this next generation of astronauts to be better than us, right? How do you, I find a lot of fulfillment in making the next generation better. So I think, however the fulfillment shows up for people, I think as long as you can find something there, you'll be happy. Going to space was great, but teaching and instructing and mentoring is also really fulfilling for me.
And that will be 10 of them? How many will that
10.
be?
Yep.
10.
Mm-hmm.
So then you'll have 13. You'll be on to for 13
there you
people.
go.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. What have you learned about yourself since then? You've evolved as a leader through different situations, high threat, high risk, safety is paramount, all of those different experiences. And now you're back on Earth and you're about to, mentor. How have you evolved your leadership, and where would you say you're trying to go?
Where am I trying to go? I think for me, leadership is also about being vulnerable and being open and honest with people about failures or hardships. And so, like in the flying community, if you make a mistake, you're immediately like, hey, I messed this up. Here's how we fix it. And that's something that we do at NASA as well, especially on a grand scale, right? Thousands of employees and everybody, that's the only way that we get to space is by, admitting when we've made mistakes, talking to each other about how we fix it, and sharing those lessons learned. And so I think that especially when you get into the higher roles of leadership, it's important to go, hey, I messed up, or hey, I don't know the answer.
Right. And
being transparent with the people that you're working with. And if you don't know it, but you know where to go find it, I'll get that answer for you, right? Right. Instead of making up an answer or trying to figure out how to look like you're in charge, right? It's really important to me to also show that we don't know everything. We're human. We make mistakes. And it's okay to make mistakes as long as you share it and you share the lessons learned and you make the next person better.
Did you experience that personally? Did you have a moment in which you had to say, hey, I made a mistake, and that's helped you realize that being vulnerable is really important? Or is that just something you've seen done really well?
I've admitted a lot of mistakes. I made a couple pretty big mistakes in the Raptor. Everybody's going to make a big mistake at some point in their life. And I think that was something that was modeled really well in the flying community early on. And it's something that's not tolerated. If you're not willing to share your lessons learned, it's not tolerated in our community. And
that's a good thing.
Yeah. I learned that in pilot training, right? If your buddy in your class makes the same mistake the next day that you made, you get in trouble because you didn't tell him how to prevent that, right?
Right.
And so it's fostered early on, especially in the flying community. I can't speak to any other community because I grew up there, but it's fostered early on, and so it's just something that comes naturally, I think, eventually because you've seen it done so many times. Right. And if you want other people to succeed, you're going to do it.
All right. Well, we have 2 questions left. The first one is, what's something you do every day to be a better leader?
Ooh, that's a good one. This is going to sound silly, but I sleep, right?
I think that's great.
I'll go back to the self-care thing, right? I put a lot of attention into, being healthy, being hydrated, sleeping well, right? Like if you take care of your body, your mind's going to do way more for you. And so I think you can show up as a better leader if you show up rested, hydrated, fed, worked out, whatever you need to do to be the best human you can be. That's what I try to do.
Okay. I like that a lot. And I think that's a good indication for me that 6 hours is probably not enough. Naveer needs a little bit more.
No, it's not.
And it's truth because you told me, so I'm going to do that. The second one is, if you could go back in time, maybe what's something you would have told yourself, your younger self, or maybe as our cadets are listening, that you've learned and what they can be doing now to be a better leader down the road?
If you run into a hardship or you fail something or something feels insurmountable or you don't feel like you're ready or you're good enough or whatever the case may be, doubt starts to seep in, right? I would say rely on the support system that you have. Rely on the people around you. Talk about it. Figure out, hey, I failed this GR. Like, man, it kind of sucks. And maybe you just need to hear me say it out loud, and maybe I just need to get it off my chest, or maybe I need help trying to figure out the solution for whatever the case may be. So, I had a built-in team on the volleyball team. I had a built-in friends and teammates that I could lean on. Maybe that's your squadron mates or your classmates or whoever it is, right? And I think finding the friends that you can rely on for the rest of your life professionally. You know, I've got a friend here that I met in the F-22 community. We've been friends for almost a decade now, and like he's still one of the first people that I call when something happens. I'm like, oh, I messed this up today, like help. So you know, finding a support system. You know, my sister's the other person that I call first off, right? And
she probably knows you're going to call when you call.
Yeah, we talk way too much. But you know, having that support system around you and finding people that really bolster you and get you across that line and help you find the courage to take the next step. I think that's really important.
Mm. I know I said there was only 2, but as I've listened to you, I just think you're just remarkable. And maybe what's something that you're proud about yourself as a leader? I would really love to hear that in your thoughts.
Ooh. You know, I think the thing that makes me the most proud as a leader is when somebody succeeds and it's something that I helped them do. So, or, you know, I've had somebody come back and say, thanks for saying that. Like that pushed me over the edge. You know, I'm really into building the next generation and making them better than us. And so if I see somebody succeeding, like that's good enough for me.
Well, this has been incredible. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you would love to share with the Long Blue Line in our community?
Oh, man. The community is great. I think I would just say thank you to the community. I've gotten so much love and support from, you know, the Coloradans, but also the Long Blue Line and the Air Force in general. You know, I love the community that we have. It goes right back to what I just said, right? Mm-hmm. Finding a community that supports you and pushes you to do better and be better. And this is that community.
Well, Vapor, I promise I'm going to get more sleep. And I just want to thank you for being such an incredible just leader and guest here on Long Blue Leadership.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. Thanks. You know, this conversation was really incredible with Vapor. I think some of the things that really stood out to me is just how incredible as a human she is. She brings humanity into leadership. She puts people first. She thinks about the team. She works hard. Don't forget to prioritize sleep. But I think really some of the lessons that we can all take away can hit us all personally, because if you think about people first and taking care of them, and the fact that you have to take care of yourself too, you can go really far in leadership. So I really appreciate her today on Long Blue Leadership. And I'm Navir Walkowitz, Class of 99. Until next time.
This edition of Long Blue Leadership was recorded on Thursday, February 19th, 2026.